All right, so get ready because we're diving deep into the world of emotions, stress, and health today.
Sounds intense.
It is. It is. You've given us some really fascinating chapters from a psychology textbook. And, well, we're going to uncover some pretty wild connections between how you feel, how your body reacts, and, your overall well-being.
The mind-body connection, right?
Exactly. And get this, did you know that people with high spinal cord injuries, they actually report experiencing emotions more intensely above the neck?
Really? That's interesting.
It's like their bodies aren't fully participating in the whole emotional experience? Like, have you ever noticed how your body feels when you're going through something really emotional?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Well, this research suggests our physical sensations and our feelings, they're super deeply connected.
Yeah, that actually ties in really well with the James Lange theory of emotion. It suggests that, well, we don't just feel emotions in our minds, but we obviously experience them as our bodies react to different situations.
So it's like our body's reaction is the emotion.
In a way, yeah. So if you have limited feedback from your body, the intensity of the emotion, it might be dialed down a bit.
So you're saying that even something as simple as a hug can actually change how intensely we feel emotions.
Yeah, pretty much.
Ah,
And there's this other study that really highlights this mind-body connection. Researchers, they injected college students with epinephrine, the hormone that makes your heart race.
oh, yeah.
And then they put them in all these different social situations.
Oh, okay, I'm already intrigued.
So they found that the students interpreted their physical arousal differently depending on who they were with. Like if they were hanging out with someone who was super happy and energetic, they felt excited. But if they were with someone who's, angry, they interpreted that same racing heart as fear.
Wait, so my heart's pounding, but I could be excited or scared? That's kind of crazy.
It is. Our brains are constantly trying to figure out what's going on, trying to make sense of how our bodies are feeling. That's where cognition comes in. Our thoughts and how we interpret things play a big role in how we experience emotions.
So it's not just, oh, my heart's racing, I must be scared. It's way more complex than that.
Yeah, way more nuanced. And this whole interplay between thoughts and emotions, I mean, it affects so many parts of our lives. Like think about fear for a second. Whether we're afraid of someone depends entirely on how we interpret their actions.
Mm.
If we think they're a threat, bam, fear response. But we see them as friendly, we might feel totally at ease.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's like our brains are constantly trying to figure out what our bodies are feeling and then like trying to label it fear, excitement, joy, anger.
Yeah, like we have this internal emotion decoder.
Yeah.
And speaking of decoding emotions, the source material actually talks about how emotions can influence our political decisions, sometimes even more than, rational thought.
Oh, really?
Yeah, studies show that when people are watching political candidates, the emotion centers in their brains are actually more active than the areas responsible for logical thinking.
So we're not always voting using logic and reason.
Not always. Our gut feelings, they definitely play a big role. And
Yeah.
it's important to be aware of that, especially now with, information and sometimes misinformation everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just big decisions like voting.
Hmm.
Our emotions, they can really color how we see everyday events too. Sometimes intense emotions can even make us personalize stuff that has nothing to do with us.
Oh,
Or like blow things way out of proportion.
oh, like that time I was convinced the barista was giving me the evil eye because I spilled my coffee.
Exactly. Probably not
Or
personal.
was he not?
But it's so easy to fall into those traps when our emotions are running high. It's all part of this intricate dance between our bodies, our minds, and, the world around us.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And a little bit unsettling, too.
I know, right? But that's what makes it so interesting to explore.
So we've talked about emotions, how our bodies and minds work together to create this whole emotional landscape. But what about stress? We all experience it, but what's really happening inside us when we're stressed out,
Yeah.
and how much should we actually worry about it?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
We'll be right back after a quick break. Okay, so we've talked about emotions, how our bodies and minds work together to create this whole emotional landscape. But what about stress? We all experience it, but what's actually happening inside us when we're stressed out, and how much should we really worry about it?
Right, well, when we encounter a stressor, our body kind of goes through this thing called the General Adaptation Syndrome, or
Right.
GAS.
GAS sounds kind of ominous.
It can be.
Yeah.
It's a three-phase process discovered by a researcher named Hans Selye. The first phase is alarm. So imagine you're in like a really intense situation like that Chicago Iroquois theater fire that the book mentions. Suddenly there's danger and your body just kicks into that, fight or flight mode.
Oh, yeah.
Your heart's racing, your blood pressure spikes, you start breathing faster, like your whole system's going into overdrive.
Yeah, yeah, I totally get that. Like, remember that time I was late for that super important meeting and got stuck in traffic? That feeling of panic, heart pounding, that my body's alarm system going off.
Exactly. Your body's pumping out adrenaline, getting you ready to either fight the threat or run away from it.
Mm.
Then comes the resistance phase. Your body's like trying to cope with the stressor. So your temperature, blood pressure, breathing, they stay elevated. Your system is flooded with hormones.
Mm.
But if this resistance phase keeps going on for too long, you hit exhaustion.
So basically, our bodies can only handle so much stress before they start to wear down.
Yeah, pretty much. During the exhaustion phase, your body's resources are depleted.
Mm.
You become more vulnerable to all sorts of problems, like getting sick, burning out,
Yeah.
even aging faster.
No way. Aging faster.
Yeah, the book highlights some pretty serious long-term consequences of prolonged stress. A weakened immune system, slower healing, even a shorter lifespan. It's not just those big dramatic events that can lead to this kind of chronic stress either.
Okay, so it's not just about avoiding those, like, meltdown moments. What else should we be looking out for?
Well, there are three main types of stressors. Catastrophes are the big ones, like natural disasters or terrorist attacks.
Okay, got it.
Think about the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. The research mentions how the rates of psychological disorders and even suicide, they tripled in New Orleans after the hurricane. That's the kind of impact a catastrophic event can have on people's mental and physical well-being.
Wow, that's intense. Hard to even imagine going through something like that. So what are the other types of stressors then?
Well, then there are significant life changes. These are events like the death of a loved one, a divorce, or even starting college or university.
Oh, yeah.
These events can be really positive, of course, but they also come with a lot of change and adjustment, which can be stressful.
Yeah. Starting college, that's definitely a huge life change. I remember feeling so overwhelmed at first. New place, new people, new everything. It makes sense that it would have an impact on our health.
Absolutely. And the research, well, it backs that up. Stressful life events, even the positive ones, can take a toll on our physical health. And then, on top of those big stressors, we have the daily hassles.
Okay, so we're talking about the everyday annoyances, like, traffic jams, work deadlines, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. These are the little things that we tend to brush off, but they can really wear us down over time, especially if they're happening constantly. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. Each one might be small, but together they can cause some real damage. The research even mentions racism as a chronic daily stressor for minority populations and the serious negative health effects of discrimination.
So it's not just about like avoiding those big stressful events, it's also about managing all those little things that can build up throughout the day.
You got it.
It sounds kind of bleak.
It can be. It
Yeah.
can be. But here's the good news. We're not powerless against stress. The way we think about stress and the coping strategies we use can make a huge difference. And that's what we'll dive into next.
Okay, so it sounds like stress is pretty much unavoidable, but we're not just sitting ducks, right? The book mentions something about mindset being important. What can we actually do to like handle stress better?
You're right. We're definitely not helpless. Our mindset plays a huge role in how we cope with stress. The research points to three key factors that can help us be more resilient.
Okay, I'm ready. Spill the beans. What are these secret weapons against stress?
The first one is perceived control. It's that feeling that you have at least some influence over a situation, even if you can't control everything.
So if I'm constantly feeling trapped, my stress levels are going to be through the roof. No wonder I feel so burnt out.
It makes sense, right? When we feel like we don't have any options, it's so easy to get overwhelmed. But even small changes, things that increase your sense of control, even those can make a difference. The book mentions this study with nursing home patients. The ones who had more choices and more control over their routines, they actually became more alert and active and happier.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So it's not like I have to solve all my problems at once. Even making small changes like rearranging my workspace or deciding what I want to eat for dinner that can help me feel more in control.
Precisely. It's all about shifting that focus from what you can't control to what you can control. Even picking up a new hobby can give you a sense of agency and accomplishment.
Okay, so check, got that one. Find little ways to feel more in charge. What's the next stress-busting tip?
Next is optimism versus pessimism. Yeah, before you roll your eyes, it's not about just, slapping on a happy face and pretending everything is perfect. It's about how you explain events to yourself. Like, what's your explanatory style?
I used to be pretty skeptical about exercise being, a cure-all, but I gotta say, after a tough day, a good run really does wonders for me. It's like hitting the reset button. Does that fit in with optimism somehow?
It absolutely does. Exercise is fantastic for boosting your mood and building resilience. The book says exercise increases serotonin in the brain, which has mood-boosting effects. It even, get this, promotes neurogenesis.
Neuro what?
Neurogenesis, the growth of new brain cells.
Wow, really? Okay, I'm sold.
But back to optimism and pessimism. Let's say you fail a test. Okay. A pessimist might think, oof, I'm stupid, or I'll never pass this course. They see the cause as something permanent and like affecting everything.
Ouch, yeah, that kind of thinking can really make you feel helpless.
Exactly. But an optimist, they might say, well, that test was unfair, or I just need to study differently next time. They see the setback as a challenge, something they can overcome.
So it's not about denying anything negative, it's about looking at it in a way that feels more, I don't know, manageable.
Exactly. And research has shown that people who tend toward optimism have better physical health. They even live longer. But, a word of caution. It's important to be realistic, too. A little bit of realistic pessimism can actually be pretty helpful.
So no sticking our heads in the sand, pretending everything's perfect.
Exactly. Acknowledging potential risks and challenges, that can help us prepare for them and make smarter decisions.
Makes sense. Balance, right? Optimism to keep us going, a dash of realism to keep us grounded. Got it. Okay, what's our third tool for fighting stress?
This one's all about connection. We're social creatures, and having close, supportive relationships, those can be a really powerful buffer against stress.
Yeah, that makes sense. When I'm stressed, I definitely find myself, craving connection.
Right. It's instinctual.
Who are your go-to people when you're feeling overwhelmed?
My family, for sure. My
Like,
friends, too. Anyone who can just listen and offer support.
yeah, yeah. And the research backs that up, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The book even talks about this study where researchers used fMRI scans. They were looking at the brains of women who were about to get a little electric shock.
Oh, wow, that doesn't sound fun.
No, not really. But anyway, the women who were holding their husbands' hands, they showed less activity in the areas of the brain linked to threat and fear.
So just the physical touch of someone we care about can actually calm our nervous systems. That's amazing.
It is. It shows how powerful human connection can be.
So we've got perceived control, optimism, and social support. These are some pretty powerful tools that we can all use to, manage stress and build a more resilient mindset.
Absolutely. It's amazing how much our thoughts and behaviors can impact our well-being.
Yeah.
It all goes back to that mind-body connection we were talking about earlier. They aren't separate. They're constantly in this dance, influencing each other.
It's been such an insightful deep dive. We've learned that emotions are more than just feelings in our heads, they're a full body experience. And while stress is part of life, we're not powerless against it. We can all take steps to manage it and build up our resilience.
It makes me think about something else the source material mentioned, post-traumatic growth. The idea that even after experiencing something really difficult, people can still go through these positive psychological changes.
It's kind of incredible to think that even trauma can lead to positive change. It makes me wonder what challenges in your own life, even the tough ones, might have helped you grow in ways you didn't expect. It's something to think about, right? Maybe even discuss with someone you trust. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into emotions, stress, and health. We hope you've learned some valuable insights and picked up some practical tools to use in your own life. Remember, you have more power than you think to navigate the ups and downs of life and to create a life that feels both meaningful and fulfilling.